If you can mute kindly if you're not speaking right now, please.
You want to impose your will as a dictator on the team?
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, welcome everyone to our 34th edition of the Service Fabric Community Q&A.
About to be 3
We
years.
have, yeah, that's
crazy.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
wow. Thinking about it like that. That's something else. We have a special guest this morning. I'm gonna have Mark Fussell introduce them, and we'll get started. Mark, are you on?
Yes, good morning. I want to introduce.
C'est quoi qui vous manquait? Vous manquez des accès en training?
Mark, hey, hang on a minute.
Hang on, let's just get everyone muted a moment. So,
Yeah, give us a sec.
Connect. Dans,
My system is so slow.
dans les API de connecteurs.
Accéder aux données des connecteurs de training.
Do you mute
Ok,
everybody?
c'est dans Connect 4.
Hold on.
We need to use these for some of
Hold
the.
on. Okay. And then unmute.
Yes. And unmute
yeah.
Mark Fussell.
Only Fussell.
I don't know if it's data that's wrong.
Il y
I
a
have
des erreurs de
no-
sérialisation, puis
Did you mute all? I said, oh, yeah. All right, I'm gonna.
Okay, so
Hey, Miguel.
Mhm.
Miguel, sorry to call you out. Miguel, Antonio, do you guys mind muting yourself?
Ben, c'est sûr que, tu sais, ça c'est un des points qu'on va apprendre, mais notre logging en ce moment, il suck. Ben, il suck.
Yeah, no, you suck.
Il
Yeah.
need to be
Yeah.
way better.
Yeah, it's
Because otherwise we have
Yeah.
nothing in
I
our
don't
site
see
then.
You guys are also muted.
okay. Now we're going to start, yes?
Cool.
Can you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Yes.
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
hear it.
Awesome.
All right. Mark, take it away.
All right, great. We have a special guest today, which is Jamie Lurock from SoCreate. And we met at Build and talked about a bunch of things. And he's going to take us through just a little demo of the work they've been doing at SoCreate on their distributed cache and their pub sub, which we thought would share amongst the community. Jamie, take it away.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
You're going to share your screen.
Okay. So hi, I'm Jamie Lurock, and I am going to go over a couple of Service Fabric open source projects that we did. One of which is the Service Fabric distributed cache, and another the Service Fabric pub sub. I'm going to go into a little bit of why we did it and how to set them up and use them. So,
Jamie, I'm gonna have you mute that little, or minimize that little video screen like you did earlier.
Sorry. Here we
Thanks.
go. Okay. So let me get into that. So Service Fabric distributed cache, the why. So distributed services need a common cache store. So what came up for us is immediately when you're developing services in distributed nature, you're behind a load balancer and you need to have some type of common store. An example would be session, between an ASP.NET application, you're bouncing between a load balance scenario and you need some type of way to have a shared session. What came up for us was we use Active Directory B2C, and we needed a way to, we have a SPA application that lives on top of it. It's behind, of course, a load balancer, and then we need a way to have a refresh token that's kind of available to be able to, refresh our login and need that to be accessible no matter what web server you're hitting within the distributed nature. So we looked at first using Redis, of course, and we actually did that route at first. And setting up a single instance of Redis is simple, but once you start setting up a cluster, it just gets more complicated. And we already had our expertise of working with Service Fabric, and we already have the reliability nature of Service Fabric. So we decided that, well, maybe we could just have our own distributed cache and manage that within Service Fabric in its reliable way. So we tried that. we also, another big thing would be Service Fabric. You're already paying for it, so there's no additional cost to incur. If you want to use Redis through Azure, you are going to pay an additional cost. But since you're already hosting a cluster, you're already paying for that cluster. So hosting distributed cache within your cluster makes it even cheaper. And reliable services are great for providing that low latency benefit with the state stored right next to your compute. So they kind of are really good fit for cache. So let me get into setting it up. So setting up the cache store, it's pretty easy. You start by creating a stateful reliable service. You add the NuGet package in, and then you extend from the base class distributed cache store. From there, you end up setting up a client. And now this could be any application or any service within Service Fabric that needs to consume this. And I have here just creating a reliable ASP.NET Core application. You add the NuGet package to it, and then you're off by registering the Service Fabric implementation of the iDistributed cache with the dependency injection container. And the way this works is it's just an implementation of the iDistributed cache that comes with .NET Core. So, and out of the box, Microsoft provides a couple implementations of that. They provide a SQL implementation of that. They also provide a in-memory one, which is not distributed in nature. And they also have a Redis implementation of it that you can add on. So let me go to a demo real quick of this. So right here, so first of all, you'd be setting up the cache store. So this just for saving time, this right here, this project called Cache Store is just a default template of creating a stateful service. You can see right here, it extends from the stateful service. You come into this, I've already added the NuGet package for caching, which is in here. But you come in here, you change this to extend from the distributed cache store service. You wipe out some of this default boilerplate template stuff, and you have a cache store now. This service will now provide your cache store. From there, you need some type of client to consume that. So I created here a web app. The web app is just a default template. Again, it's a stateless service, an ASP.NET Core stateless service. You create that, you add in the NuGet package, and you come into your startup, and now you're going to need to register with the dependency injection container. You're going to need to register the distributed cache. So, and you can see here out of the box, you have a couple that I was talking about. You have the distributed memory cache, you have the distributed SQL Server cache, and now with this additional package, you have the distributed Service Fabric cache. So you add this to your project. This will automatically do discovery to find the cache store. It'll handle that for you. There is configuration options if you want to specify. But then you would go in, you have some type of controller, iDistributed cache, you take in through dependency injection, and you're off kind of creating. And then from here, this is just out of the box stuff. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the iDistributed cache. This comes with .NET Core. You would just use this just like you would in any .NET Core project. But you could, let me just show you real quick. I'll come here and show you this already implemented. So I took in the distributed cache. I have a simple thing here that's adding absolute expiration for 10 seconds, and all I'm putting in is a date time into the cache and setting that in the cache. All this again is just implementation of iDistributed cache. So we come here, we have our page here. The date time you can see is from the last time I refreshed this, but it's caching it for 10 seconds. So the date updates to the current time right now. But if I keep refreshing this, obviously for the next 10 seconds, it's going to stay cache. Not that exciting, it's cache, but it's cache within Service Fabric. That's the exciting part about it. Okay, so that's kind of cache in a nutshell. Let me go on to quickly here to Service Fabric Pub Sub, the why. You need reliable broadcasting of messages between your services, some way to communicate in a asynchronous way, making sure that you're not communicating synchronously between your services, because doing so, kind of takes down your services. You have a cascading failure problem of communicating synchronously between your services. So having a way to talk between those is very important. We looked at doing that with managing, RabbitMQ or Kafka or some other pub sub, but that requires, again, additional expertise and possibly additional cost. So falling into, using the reliable services, this made sense. So let me go through setting this up really quick. So setting up a pub sub broker, and the broker is the guy who's going to be handling the communication between the publisher and subscriber. So you set up a broker by creating a stateful reliable service again. You add the NuGet package in, and then you're just going to simply extend from the broker service. And that's going to be your middle guy between your pub and your sub. Of course, you need to define some messages that are going to go back and forth. This is the message envelope that is the data contract between both the publisher and the subscribers. This could be anything that's serializable that you're going to send back and forth between those two. So you're probably going to take your data contract and you're going to put that into some type of shared assembly that both your publisher and your subscriber service are going to reference. From there, you're going to set up a subscriber. Setting up a subscriber, you can do this by creating any reliable service that needs to subscribe to these messages. It could be an actor, a stateful service, or a stateless service. You add in the NuGet package that gives you the subscriber things you need, and then you're going to need to reference that shared library that I was just talking about that has those data contracts, whatever the messages that are going to be sent. And then from there, you're going to extend from a base class, depending if it's a stateful or stateless service. And then you're going to add a method to subscribe to that message type and decorate that method with a subscribe attribute. And I'll show you that in a demo. Setting up your publisher is as simple as adding any reliable service that needs to publish messages. You add the NuGet package, and then again, the reference to that shared library that you created that has those data contracts. From there, you're going to use the broker client to publish out your messages. So let me show you that in action. So you're going to start out by, you're going to need to create a broker, because that's the middle guy. That's the guy who is handling your the messaging between the publisher and the subscriber. And to do that, you come in. Again, this is just a default out of the box stateful service. You come into that stateful service, you remove the boilerplate. I've already done that out of here, and you extend from broker service. After, of course, you've added in the NuGet package, that's the pub sub NuGet package that's needed. But from there, now you have your broker, your middle guy who's going to handle those messages between your publisher and your subscriber. So now we need some type of message to send. So this is my shared library here with my data contract that I'm going to be sending back and forth. I simply have here a property of content, but you could have, any number of things you wanted here to go back and forth between your publisher and your subscriber. Going into a publisher is as simple as I just created a stateful service. This simply has the broker client in here. It has this is just a default kind of counter implementation with a loop here, and all it's doing is it's messaging out that it's gonna the counter, and it's really publishing here using the contract that we defined in the shared library, and it's publishing out what iteration it's on. From there, you set up a subscriber service, and the subscriber service I set up here is just a stateless service, and the stateless service. So we extend from our stateless subscriber stateless service base, which again just involves adding the NuGet package, and then extending from this, removing. You can have whatever you want in here, but you need to put an attribute on whatever your method is and your contract type. So this is again references that shared contract that you have of the message. And now this thing is receiving those messages when they're being published out, and it's just logging the fact that whatever the message is, showing this running. I think I have this. I should have started that while I was talking because it takes a second, but just to kind of show you it running in action, that we're publishing and subscribing. Things are kicking off right now, and eventually we should see what we saw in the publisher, which was sending a message and some number. And then what we should see is from the subscriber service is it's received the message and it's outputting whatever the message that was sent, and the publisher's sending iteration : and the number of the iteration. So if we come here, we're seeing sending a message, we're seeing receive the message, and you can verify and see as you expand these that the subscriber came from, the publisher service sent this message, and the subscriber here received that message. So that's my demo, really. That's all I have for you guys. Just some links here for docs. There's some docs on how to set up these projects, and I look forward to other people in the community creating awesome, reliable services based on Service Fabric. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. This is really good. We see lots and lots of people use PubSub between actors when they want to run things at scale. So, seeing something like this that people can take and just use out of the box is really cool. So thanks. This is really good contributions to the community, and we appreciate it a lot.
You have some questions on the IM window if you're available to answer them, Jamie.
Okay. Let me get there.
It's okay. Or we can read them to you. It's usually what we do to ourselves. I think it's down.
Yeah, your first question is, do you have any kind of authentication between client and the cache service?
The communication happens directly within Service Fabric. There isn't any authentication, but that the client, which is would be another service within Service Fabric, is communicating directly via service remoting between the cache store and the client.
So you could conceivably use the same security mechanisms we have there to ensure that was encrypted or authenticated or whatever.
Sure, it's using Service Fabric's service remoting.
Yep.
V2 calls.
And then the second question was, is there any dead lettering or other, like a lot of PubSub things have some of these advanced features around dead letters or poison messages or retries or whatever?
For the PubSub?
Yeah.
I not at this point. There's not. But of course, it's an open source project. We can take contributions on that. There is, I think, a little bit of in the code, a start of that, but what we're looking to do is kind of add to this and create some, one thing we'd like to get in there is some type of dashboard on actually what's in the queues and be able to, kill queues and so on, some type of information about, how many messages are transferring per second and, just a display console of sorts that we want to get in there, but that's something that we just have on the roadmap.
And then the other question is, do you shard the data across the cluster? I presume that that's for both, probably more relevant to the cache.
Yes, I mean, it's using the stateful services. So yes, it is. You're setting up your partition as far as your partition size and everything for your reliable, for your stateful service. And yes, it is then sharded throughout the.
And then I think there's more queue scenario questions, right? Like round robining and back pressure. I'd imagine that a lot of these don't exist yet because it's a pretty straightforward pub sub queue. It's presuming success for a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
Today.
Yes. Yes.
But I still think that's it's a great start certainly, and then maybe we can ask the community, right? These are clearly some interesting features or features people are interested in. Maybe we can pile on to the GitHub project and start trying to figure some of this stuff out.
No, it'd be awesome. I mean, taking contributions, people want this stuff in there. It's up there on GitHub, so we're more than willing to, work with the community on what they want in there and try and get it in there if we can, or if they would like to submit pull requests.
That interesting question around if the receiver isn't there at the time and then it comes back up, is the message persisted and does it get replayed, or is it at the time kind of instantaneous?
No. So if you had a subscriber and that subscriber went down and then that subscriber, eventually came back up again, yes, you would get those messages. They are sitting in a queue waiting for that subscriber to then consume those messages. Now, if the subscriber, it's not an after the fact thing. If you weren't a subscriber at the time, you're not going to get things, that you weren't a subscriber to.
Pretty good. All right. Well, thanks to Jamie and the SoCreate guys.
Yep.
Also for sharing their work. I think those are two neat projects. I echo Antonio. Congratulations. I guess we'll
let's jump into
our regular schedule.
Yeah, a regularly scheduled service private Q&A.
All right.
So this, folks, add your questions, comments to the chat window, and we'll take off with that.
There was a question before we even got started. I don't know if we actually answered around plans for the existing programming models and services or any sort of automation tooling for migration to mesh. This is probably for you and Siddhartha, really.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We've thought about it. We haven't done a lot in the way of getting people there. Some of it has to do with the fact that mesh obviously implies that everything is running in containers, whereas Service Fabric today doesn't necessarily have that requirement. So we are thinking about what that will feel like. I don't think I have a good answer for you yet. Siddhartha, if you have something that you think is worth adding, please feel free to. But generally, it's more like, yes, thank you for reminding us. We are sort of thinking about it. I don't have a good story yet, but we'll keep you posted.
Okay. Let's see. What was this? Club sub questions. Server 2019 support.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
I'm assuming that is this Azure or on-prem? It should be the same.
Should be the same.
Should be the same. We've been testing it in our test harnesses. Things generally look good. So I guess what the underlying script there is, if you were to brute force your way onto a 2019 deployment, you'd probably be fine. In terms of announcing support for it, it will likely come with the next version.
Yeah, in
We
the,
actually.
Our stuff's already there, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, we already announced support
We already
for
announced.
Windows Server 2019.
Right. This is the versioning thing that.
Yeah, we always get tripped up.
Yeah. We're fine. 2019 is
It's
there.
fully supported right now.
It
You just
is.
can't get it through Portal, but if you define it in your ARM template, you can
It's
define.
So it's that it's not in the magic drop-down list.
Yeah.
It's not in the portal,
But it's supported by the runtime, supported by SFRP, available in Azure, just not visible.
Yeah, documented, that it's supported, but
You have a link to it now?
Okay, so let's
And
find
then-
the announcement.
sorry.
Yeah, jump in.
And then we'll just drop it into the chat.
a little follow-up question from that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so is that also supporting Server 2019 containers inside of Server 2019 Service Fabric?
Yes. So 2019 containers just means that the containers feature was turned on within the operating system.
No, I think he means Windows Server. If I create a Windows Server container image.
But then
Yes.
that too.
Because if last I had checked, I think Service Fabric had only supported 2016 1803. Does Service
Yeah.
Fabric support 2016 1809 containers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Great. 1809 is 2019.
yes, 1809.
It's not 2016.
This is where we
Getting
get.
confused.
Yeah. So
This is
just
hell.
okay. So I'm gonna
I
actually.
thought
explain
there
this to
was a
people.
Windows Server 2016 version 1809 release.
No, there was a 2016 version that was 1709, not 1809. 1809 corresponds to 2019.
Okay. So I mean,
Yes.
that's sort
This
of,
this is the confusing world that Microsoft has created for itself. But
I
Yeah.
understand now. Okay. So that helps. And let me just let you know why I'm asking that question. There is a bug that was fixed in Server 2016 1803 that I
Yes.
need to consume. But if I'm running, and this is where it gets complicated, is with your Windows and server combinations. If I want to run something that hosts a Windows Server version, and I'm not going to say the year, 1809, then I would need to run Windows 10 1809 with Windows Server 2019. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine. Those are
Okay.
the same bindings. They're both RS5 builds.
those are both. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is awful.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure because I'm asking my TI team. I'm on Windows 10 1709 currently. We're going to skip 1803 as an organization, and we're going to go to 1809. But then I can still host a Windows Server 2016 1803 on Windows 10 1809 because it's previous.
Yes.
And I can also host the 2019. Okay,
I would
cool.
also,
Thank you.
there's a big, yes, that should work. From Service Fabric side, we don't really care what the version of the OS or the container is. There are a lot of compatibility warnings on the Windows container side. If you go to their page, they actually have a pretty good table about what container image versions are supported on what host OSs. They're also doing a lot of work to make that more flexible. If you go back to the early days of Windows containers, they actually said that the container and the OS had to match perfectly, which made patching a little bit difficult. But they've been relaxing those restrictions and actually now have pretty good guidance about what container images work there. So if you're looking to bring something from older OSs up on top of new ones, I would say let's see if we can find that page and just check there. If it's supported there, then Service Fabric should support it.
Okay, thank you.
Greg asked if it was a PubSub framework discussion. Yes, it absolutely was. I recommend you check out the SoCreate stuff. They also did a Redis caching thing, not Redis, of course, but a caching thing, which you might want to check out. So cool. Question, at Build 2019, there was one Service Fabric session, but 10 AKS sessions. Why? Yeah, because we want to sell a lot of AKS, and AKS right now is big, and
It's hot.
it's hot, and it turns out that hosting your own AKS environment is miserable, or your own Kubernetes environment is kind of miserable. So Azure has decided that that's a big market that they want to go after, and so created a bunch of sessions that target and talked about AKS and Kubernetes and that side of things. I would not use the fact that one thing was promoted heavily by marketing to decide about the fate of anything else. So if you have any questions, please let us know. There, in that one Service Fabric session, hopefully you attended it and you saw the large list of products and companies that run on top of SF. So we tried to do as much coverage in that one session as we could. So I would just, this is not an or, right? This is both are public products, both are supported, and one got a lot more air coverage this time, but I wouldn't use that to mean much. Hopefully that answers the question, because engineering doesn't control everything. It turns out, as much as we wish we would.
I think is that Marcin that said because marketing.
Yeah, I mean it's a Microsoft conference and focuses on what Microsoft wants to grow and sell, and where the community is a little bit, and that makes sense that would be promoted, and they had a lot of good successes and a lot of cool announcements, and that's fine. That's great.
Scroll. Thank you. Let's see.
Is
that us?
Looking. Saw some tweets about work in progress on actors and serverless, but didn't have time to read more details. I wish Mark had been here to.
There were tweets. The problem is there were tweets, and then he couldn't really respond to them because of what he's allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, what we can say is, yes, we're doing some work to figure out how we can bring actors and Service Fabric actors up in a serverless way through Azure in general. Beyond that, there's really not much.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because you got a bunch of these things like actors and functions and durable functions and the new, I don't know what they're calling it, but the new work that the function has announced.
Which is really just actors and functions.
Which is kind of actory stuff. There's, I mean, arguably some of the ACI stuff also works in here, where maybe that's for slightly longer running functions. And then there's all sorts of subtle differences between all these different environments.
Correct.
And so I think what you're seeing is that there's some work to go on across all these teams to try and unify some of this and come up with a way of describing, this spectrum of workloads, which are these typically short running, historically stateless, but maybe stateful stuff where they're tiny little independent units and you can kind of scale them out horizontally in a lot of cases. So there is work going on. I wish Mark was here to talk about it. Now that Build's gone away, more of these things.
Did Mark drop? Mark is here.
Mark
Yeah. Did he drop?
No, he said he had to go.
Yeah, no meeting.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay.
Perfect. So he's the one who's probably best equipped to talk about that right now, but hopefully we'll get more concrete details as some of the work across all these teams comes together a little bit more. Let's see here.
The next one's from Antonio.
We found the version compatibility paper. Cool. I have a Service Fabric project using .NET Framework 4.5.1 and old remoting packages. How easy, painful would it be, if you know, I think, to adapt to the new stuff? .NET Core, new remoting. I've done a couple of these, but I did them on older versions of .NET Core. Most of the problems that I've seen or the complexities are in changes between .NET, the full .NET framework, and .NET Core. They've done a really good job around compatibility, and it's been getting better as the .NET Core versions have come along. Earlier, it was a lot rougher. I would say that the biggest change or the biggest problem that I always have when converting projects like this is that your .NET framework is now many, many independent packages, and figuring out where that type was that you referenced because it was just in one big .NET framework install, figuring out where that one package or utility or class now lives and pulling in the right dependent package, that consumed the majority of my time when I did a lot of these migrations. I don't remember anything specific, and I don't think there's anything specific on the SF side where we would have broken compatibility between projects. That part felt pretty much like a drop-in. You'll also have some challenges around the project types. I think if you go create a file new project .NET Core these days, the project structure that you get is actually a little bit different than what you probably have on the full framework. So it's some of those structural things, but there are things that the community, in terms of the .NET community, is pretty well aware of, and I think a lot of the guidance is already out there for anything you're going to run into. I don't recall anything SF specific. Certainly, if you do run into anything Service Fabric specific, I would say open an issue on our GitHub page, or just mail us and let us know, or drop into the Slack and let us know, and we can help figure out where things changed. But I think you should be pretty much good to go.
All right, I think Marcin, congratulations on Atlas. Your build on Build. This is huge. can you say something about Evolved App Model Service?
Sure.
Tag.
And the next question actually is also very similar. It says, any news on what Chaco talked about at Build? Mesh update sounds like it's converging with other tech. So
These are
same
related.
question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the Build talk, please do see it. I do know that the last part of it where we discussed this stuff was a little rushed because we were running a little strapped for time.
And Prasad has actually put the link in right below these questions.
Oh, fantastic.
So start there, but maybe you can.
I'm gonna tell them what it says.
Decompress. Yeah, in
Yeah.
the last 10 minutes of the talk, you got a little compressed. So
Yes.
maybe you can take this time to decompress.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do.
And so you have a whiteboard. If you need to graph anything out, you can make your slides there.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
Right
Actually,
down there. Or this.
So that
Actually,
one, that's even better.
Yeah, let's do that. So basically, we have. I can move like this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, fancy.
Oh, okay, now we can't see where it's right. That's gonna be true.
Can you not?
Remember how the,
Oh, this is not being
Give
shared.
it
is
full-
it?
I think if you go to the whiteboard, it should.
There's a share button somewhere here.
Hold on. Oh, yeah.
Open share tray.
There you go.
Is that visible now?
One second.
visible.
It
Loading.
is. It is.
Yeah.
He's giving me a thumbs up.
It's
I'm
coming.
going.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just gonna scroll down from here so we can bring that up. I'm gonna do this in blue because this is fun. Okay, so basically what we
Nice, perfect.
what we have is we've got some platform, right? So you guys are familiar with this as Mesh. This is basically some kind of containers on demand or containers as a service where a request comes in from somewhere and asks for an app. So there's a user requesting an app. User wants an app, describes the app in some way. The request comes in, the app consists of several containers, and there's a platform that's responsible for basically saying that, look, like I got this request for an application, it may have been in the form of a JSON or whatever. So currently the Mesh implementation uses JSON because we're compliant with ARM. And then the platform comes in and serves that request and gives you these containers on demand. And sort of the direction that we're heading in is basically saying that these two things are actually different layers. So you have a clear layer that represents the application model. And then you have a clear layer that represents the platform that's giving you containers on demand in a serverless way. Serverless, okay, you guys get it. Cool. And so we are drawing this distinction with the intent that Mesh effectively gets split into two pieces. And so this part is what we're now calling Atlas. And this part we're still figuring out, but there's some kind of evolved app model is the term that we've sort of been using. And you'll hear more about this shortly. And the intent is basically to say that we're building this platform. So let's talk about Atlas first. So we're building this platform that will serve as the primary way in which containers will be served in a shared way across all Azure services. So that now means that, before you were coming in through this particular app model, which is going to become this evolved app model, but you've got other services too. So for example, you've got functions, and this is specifically the Linux implementation for the time being. That's one way in which you can reach Atlas. You've got ACI, which is another service inside Azure that requests containers. The intent is that will also, come to Atlas. And then you've got a bunch of other services that are in the making that are built around this idea that people like running in containers. People want to build cloud-native applications. And if we're building one platform that can serve these requests in a consistent way, that is the state-of-the-art way to get containers inside Azure, then why not share that wealth across the services? And hence the need for abstracting these two pieces away. So that's the general messaging around Atlas. So it's our shared serverless platform for giving containers in a multi-tenant way to various services or access points or entry points, including Linux functions, including ACI, and including whatever the current Mesh app model evolves into. Then talking about the app model itself, and the way I like to explain this, and Sudhamra, you can feel free to sort of add more color to this, is basically we ran this preview, right? So we've been running a preview for Mesh for over a year. I mean, the private preview started early 2018. The public preview started July 2018. So almost a full year of public preview. We had several customers. I think it was like 700 plus customers that were involved. We had a couple of them actually running in production with go live licenses that we handed out. And we got two big pieces of feedback, right? So one is that SF Mesh still had a lot of SF in it. And what that means is that you'd come to Mesh, you deploy an app, and the app consisted of several top-level resources. These resources were things like Service Fabric Mesh.network or Service Fabric.volume or Service Fabric.application. And really, a platform like Mesh, like Service Fabric, should have been an implementation detail. and there was too much of service traffic bleeding through to the point where what we'd gone and done was effectively build a bunch of proxies that accessed different Azure resources and made them available inside this mesh land. And what really should have happened is that it shouldn't have been this. It should have just been the Azure resources directly, right? So this should have been a Azure native, effectively, model that would have worked. And instead of giving you a service fabric network, you should have just gotten an Azure network, and you should have just gotten the storage volume amount that they can give you instead of us like building a proxy for it. So that was the first piece of feedback, is that like, let's figure out how to make this really service fabric agnostic. It needs to be the container native platform as a service offering that exists on Azure and should be available as an Azure offering that brings all these pieces together natively, right? So that's one thing. The second thing was, it was a new ad model. So it meant that people had to go and learn a new way to describe their applications. And some people liked it, some people didn't. It worked for some people better than it worked for others. And at the same time, we saw a lot of market momentum towards Kubernetes and a bunch of open source tooling that was being developed that had opinions on how an application should be described. And so what that means is that a lot of engineers out there today that are entering the space are building and have a consistent understanding of certain concepts and how applications should be described when they need to run in the cloud, especially containerized applications. And what we wanted to do was, instead of imposing another thing that came out from us, like, can we build something that plays nicely with that mentality, fits in with the people that are comfortable with that approach? And so part two of this is effectively saying, let's change some of how we describe an application to make it feel like it's more cloud native, to make it more compatible with open source tooling and with open source platforms. And specifically, can we make it compliant to specifications and stuff that can actually run in an extensible way on even Kubernetes if you were to have a cluster that was running on premises, and that way still respect the need for a hybrid approach where you can deploy an application that's described in a consistent way on a Kubernetes cluster outside of Azure, and then also be able to deploy it in Azure. And when it comes to Azure, it happens to be running with a service that we've built that is built on top of Atlas.
I think, well, don't look at me.
Makes sense?
Let's see what the room says.
Any questions?
So that was almost as fast as the end of your talk, but I think having it now a little bit,
yes,
the colors
more
help.
dedicated. The colors help.
That's
also,
your comment or comment from?
No, that's me.
Okay.
That's him.
That's Matt's editorial.
That's him for sure.
That's true. I didn't want to take up too much time.
No, it's okay.
Oh, we got one here.
Yeah.
But I think that this helps, and it's something that we're, I think, looking for feedback on.
Yes.
Does this make sense?
Yes.
How does this all work together? So please feel free to ask questions, and we can also address some of them in the chat.
Yeah, we just got one.
I think we'll pop back to where we were in the chat stream and
Yes.
then maybe address some of these things
As they
in
come.
a second.
Yes.
Okay.
So 6.4 has been getting long in the truth. What's coming? So actually, there is a roadmap doc out there, which I think that we're on the official product roadmap.
Yes, Azure updates.
So if you go to Azure Updates and just look for Service Fabric, you should see things that get started, things that are in progress. We can dump the link to that in the chat window. So we're trying to make better use of that roadmap.
I think I got ak.ms/sf/updates.
Try it.
Yeah.
And then dump it into the window.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make better use of that updates feed. So I would check out there. If there's anything in particular that you're looking for, please let us know. We're also trying to get better about tagging specific workloads and improvements in GitHub. We're trying to do a better job there. We're working through some, how do we, train people to do this stuff? So thank you for your patience, and sorry about the delays and sometimes where it's taken us a long time to respond to things. We got busy. But I think that's probably the two best ways to look at stuff that we're working on. Is Service Fabric Mesh being retargeted to run on top of Kubernetes? No. No. Also, I think that if you just watched Deep's discussion there, that should show you kind of where the layering of things is going to be.
Well, I mean, I could just do it super explicitly, right? Which is basically this is still just a managed service fabric cluster, which is still running on VM scale sets, et cetera, all the stuff that you're used to. You still get this goodness if you request for service fabric. We've just taken this, made it fully managed, and then offered deployments on top of this managed stack through an entry point, which is Atlas, which then serves a bunch of other services out.
Yep.
So
TLDR, everything you have continues to work and run. And the future of Mesh Atlas is this higher level programming model that we think will separate out and the concerns a little bit better than they had been previously. So hopefully that addresses that. Are there any announcements around the stateful backup solution? There have been some improvements to the backup and restore service, but I'm also going to drop a link to a backup and restore tool. We call it more of a disaster recovery tool into the chat, which is about if you have two clusters and you're trying to like keep the applications synced between them in order to have an active environment so that if one environment does fail, it's easy to stand up the other one. That's a tool that we just released. Of course, with a lot of things like this, it's fairly new and we're looking for feedback. So I would say start there maybe a little bit and let us know if that's what you're looking for. If that doesn't meet your needs, we'd of course want to know that as well. Marcin asks, what is the progress on the struggle against Windows networking? Can we expect bring your own VNet anytime soon?
I can talk to this. So struggle against Windows networking is one way to put it. I think we've actually made a decent amount of headway recently. So the networking team, the Azure networking team specifically, has been working pretty hard to figure out how we can get through the networking APIs that exist on Windows today to support concepts like bring your own VNet for containers that are deployed on Windows hosts. We're getting pretty close. It seems realistic. We have dwindled the number of bugs down to the low tens. So we're getting close, Marcin. Just hold out maybe a couple of months and we're going to figure out how to light it up correctly. But some of the internal testing has been very positive in the last month, and I'm optimistic about getting something there soon.
Whit asked if the thing that I was making up that we actually have a Slack channel. No.
There's one we missed, by the way.
Oh.
I think they're listening to Microsoft more than the technicians. Any tips to win them over for SF versus AKS? Okay, so this is an interesting one. I think one thing to know is a lot of this comes down to personal preference, of course, and it also comes down to sort of what they're designing for. I think where we've seen Service Fabric be specifically successful, and we talked a little bit about this in the build talk as well, so it might be worth watching. But where we've seen Service Fabric be specifically successful has been, stateful computation, using our programming models, or for people that are familiar with .NET and want to continue developing that space. That's where we think Service Fabric really fills the gap. Well, it's the product to use and would make the most sense for a customer because it'd be easy for them to understand how it works.
Right.
However,
also some things around consistency across environments and support.
Yes.
So AKS is a managed service inside Azure, right? If you wanted a Kubernetes experience on-prem, today there's no Microsoft product that can give you that. So if you have customers that are in these situations where they want a consistent supported platform between, say, their own environment standalone or their own test environments on-prem and Azure, that's something that Service Fabric does today that there's not, other than maybe Azure Stack, really other options available. So things like that where you want that supported platform across multiple environments and the uniformity of that, right? In addition to some of the differentiated features like launches things that aren't containers, these first-class programming models, some of the integration with tooling, though the Kube tooling has come along.
It's quite well, yeah.
It's quite good now. But those are the main differences that we would say. And again, it comes down to what you're really looking for.
Yeah, so what I will add to that, though, is Kubernetes has a lot of market momentum today. People are really interested in it. And we want Azure to be a very successful place for you to run Kubernetes as well. So, if for some reason you really want to use Kubernetes, whether that's because all container native, that's what your developers are familiar with, or that's like the kind of talent you want to be hiring in the future, then that's fine. We'd be happy to help you on that journey. We want to make sure that you're successful in Azure, regardless of which path you end up taking.
And we're all one big team. So really, it's all coming to the same place, and you have that core of excellence inside Microsoft of running containerized workloads, right? And so the choice of orchestrator, I actually think, and this is kind of the way that you see the market moving, is choosing orchestrators is choosing your favorite sports team, right? It's important, right, in a cultural sense. But we think a lot of the future is serverless, right? In which a lot of these debates around which orchestrator do I pick and how do I choose between the feature sets kind of just goes away, and the orchestrators become implementation details of something like a mesh or an ACI or a functions or an app services or whatever, right? So we think that a lot of workloads are really belong at those higher levels. We're going to try and get you, the joke that I always keep saying is, hey, we're finally going to get you back to a PaaS. We're going to get you back to a platform as a service, right? That you just throw your application at and it runs, and you don't have to do all the work you have to do today with orchestrators of wiring everything up together in terms of the infrastructure, right? So we want to try and get people away from managing infrastructure because it turns out it's hard and complex and undifferentiated, right? The time you spend figuring out how Azure's networking wires up between a VM scale set and a SQL server is lost time. So we want to try and get you back to a place kind of with these higher level programming models where you get to talk about your application, you get to focus on building your application, and you hand your application to a platform and let the platform do the heavy lifting. And the presumption, and I happen to think that it's true, is that in that serverless world, you don't care so much about what the orchestrator under the hood is, right? And so you don't have to care about whether it's Service Fabric or anything else. Whether or not we represent everything in XML or JSON or YAML or JAML or whatever is completely opaque, right? You don't have to worry about it. And again, we continue to offer the orchestrators both in the form of AKS and SFRP as tools that are available for you if for whatever reason the managed serverless environment doesn't work for you, right? So if you've got that workload that you can't containerize or don't want to containerize, you can still host that as a guest XE on SFRP or Service Fabric standalone, or stand it up in your own VMs if you want. But the whole point is that there's this continuity now between there's the power of the full orchestrator access if you need it, and then there are these higher level models that let you get to serverless if you don't, and you can hide the orchestrator and not have to deal with it or the rest of the infrastructure as well. And we think that a lot of workloads are going to land there.
Right.
I think there's one from Greg that we actually missed.
Did we?
The 6.4 has been getting a little long in the tooth. What's coming? Is it all Service Fabric Mesh? Do you guys have a roadmap document out there?
So the roadmap piece, I think we addressed
We
with
did.
the Service Fabric updates.
Okay.
6.4 being long in the tooth specifically is nothing. We just needed to do a little bit of patching and stuff that
I think
reduced how quickly we could get the full version out.
Yeah, I think if you go look in the release notes, you'll see that it's been a lot of improvements around things like upgrades, health monitoring, a lot of little stability
And we
fixes.
kept packing it, like, because every week we'd be like, oh, we could add this other thing. So it's a fat release, and we're hoping it'll be very useful.
Yeah, I'd say the delta between 6.4 and now 6.4 CU6 or whatever
Yeah.
we're at is actually pretty significant in terms of additional value. But it's a lot of these incremental things around improving stability and health messages and
Correct.
performance and stuff like that.
And also, we've spent the last couple of months also focusing on our engineering systems a little bit and figuring out how can we be more consistent about releases. So please look forward to some more info on what that will look like in the future. But we're, the 6.4 was really a transition period for us to understand and establish some stability in how we're going to go about doing these things. So stay tuned for that. And then for Is It All SF Mesh, I put out a brief blog post on a Service Fabric Mesh refresh that's coming out at the end of the month. And that is sort of orthogonal to the release train for 6.4. That will be specific to just Mesh, and that will include things like managed identities and turning on billing, along with some improvements to diagnostics experience.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, 5 minutes left. Lightning round.
Lightning round.
Here we go.
Empty stateful service requires tens of MB of total memory, but adding a reliable concurrent queue as well with the most simple logic, occupied memory exceeds over 900 MB after just an hour of light testing. Classic case of memory leak, but we've strictly followed code of product documentation. In this perspective, I don't think it could be a leak. Is there an implicit logic in reliable queues that allocates memory more than needed?
In reliable concurrent queue. Reliable concurrent queue keeps a lot of things in memory, but this still feels weird. I also wonder if you're hitting, for a long time, .NET has not had the best, let's say, handling of strings, where they basically never leave, never get GC'd. I can look into that one. If there's an issue on GitHub that you have a repro of this, point me there. Just leave it in the chat window. If not, create one and send it out, and we can take a look at it. I agree that something feels weird, but we can figure it out. Marcina asked if the app model is going to run on top of K8s, is it going to be a custom resource description in K8s? I wish the app model guys were here directly to answer.
Yes.
I think it kind of has to be. That's how.
Guys,
Hey, son, what's up?
Hey,
You got 1
yeah,
minute. But
I've been listening to it all. On the Kubernetes implementation, it would just be a bunch of CRDs that we manage for you. That's right.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Is Atlas still Service Fabric under the hood? Yes. Is the new app model going to support reliable collections?
So the app, so this is an interesting thing. This is the app model. This is the application packaging and description language, right? So asking that question is kind of like saying, does my application manifest
have
support
reliable
collections?
collections? Yeah.
And the answer is no, because that's a programming model.
Yeah.
So it's a fair question to ask, well, okay, what programming models are going to be supported? And that's something that we're still figuring out. But the app model itself is agnostic to all of this. It has no idea what's running inside of your code, right? Which is good. You actually want that.
Yeah.
But the question of will collections run in these environments is still TBD. We're trying to figure out how to take as much of the Service Fabric programming models as possible and lift them up into these serverless environments. And I think that that's still a lot of work in progress.
Okay.
But that's
And the
basically
other challenge, yes, sorry, Matt. The other challenge with reliable collections is this app model is supposed to be portable, and you should be able to deploy the same thing to K8. So it's kind of challenging for us to figure out how to get that portable. But we are working through that.
Yeah, and I mean we've talked about implementations where we'd have a reliable collections library that doesn't react in other systems and works just like a dictionary, but when it comes to a Service Fabric environment, it hooks in and gets the replication and the reliability. So there are things that we've been experimenting with, and we're hoping that we're able to light this up.
A related question is, in the past, Mesh was going to support native non-containerized SF apps. Is this a change? No, I don't think Mesh ever, at least not.
We did say that there was a time we were considering supporting like people giving us applications as lines of code as opposed to a full container image.
But then
that didn't have to do with native Service Fabric services. So that's a little bit different, Greg.
Maybe it was just a parsing where we could have been more clear.
Yeah, but that is not like off the table, but it's certainly not a top priority right now since we're still trying to get the picture right for actual containerized applications.
Right.
Once we're there, then we can have these conversations.
Yeah, I think it is. There's two separate things, right? Getting containerized apps modeled correctly in this new application model so that you can deploy them anywhere and have a real PaaS underneath you. And then secondly is programming models inside those containers. What are they? Which ones are they supporting? How do they work? What's the performance characteristics? Those are two separate things and they're going in parallel.
Currently, there's an upgrade path for non-SF services. Is there work being done to address migrating the core SF services into upgraded machine type?
I don't think I understand this.
Yeah, I don't understand the question.
Maybe you rephrase that one with or
and space it below and we'll get to it.
Sorry.
Okay, is the new app program model is going to run on dumb gates? How are you going to do reliable collections without SF failure detection? So Marcin, this sort of comes down to us figuring out how to hook into that and on the K8 side, I don't know, it's still a bit of an open question. We're figuring it out. We'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I think the answer is, again, there's two different work streams and they're parallel. It's more likely that the just raw containerized stuff is going to show up first.
Yeah.
And then we have to figure out how to get some of the Service Fabric capabilities inside the containers that run in these serverless environments.
Correct. Well phrased, Matt. Carefully phrased. I like that.
Yeah, parsing.
I couldn't have done the Q&A without asking for a scheduler. Is there any chance we can get something like a task scheduler as a service in the product? It would really help.
It would. We do not have plans to do that today. I've seen people use Azure Web Jobs basically to trigger stuff today, or whatever the equivalent Azure cron service is these days. Understood. Maybe talk to the SoCreate guys. They seem to be on a tear.
All right. Last I heard, Mesh didn't support reliable services and actors. Is this still the case? Yes, it is still the case. Is it planned? Yes, it is planned. We do want to have support for these things in the future.
These types of programming models.
Yes, correct. So in the future of Evolved App Model Mesh, if a project starts today and needs production-ready orchestration and goes with AKS/SF, would it still be possible to move over to Mesh easily?
I would say yes, if they start with containerized workloads.
Correct. I think the biggest hassle will actually be getting your stuff into containers, not moving to the app model.
Right.
I think moving to the app model is just about learning how you describe the workload. But if the workload isn't ready, you've got a lot more pain ahead of you. Yeah.
And again, I'd also say, like, use the right tool for the job. Both of these things are going to be supported for the foreseeable future. So if the pain and issues and what you lose by going to today's serverless environments is not worth it to you, and if your workload would really benefit from some of the capabilities of, say, the programming models that don't exist there yet, you're free to use the programming models. Please continue to use them. We're still taking fixes and doing features and improvements. So if you run into something there, we're happy to support you and continue to do work there, right? We're just trying to say that we think that the infrastructure work is real, and for a lot of people that is invaluable. So you run in serverless if you can, and if you can't or would benefit a lot from the existing environments, go ahead and use those and we'll be there as well.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, we're about at the
Last
end.
question is, are there any SF mesh templates for Visual Studio? Yes, we do have development experience. I'm going to paste a link in the chat as soon as possible. 2019 support for mesh just went live, and I think with that, I'm done.
Okay.
We're at the top of the hour, folks.
If we missed anything, I would say please let us know.
I'm pasting some links in the chat for the last 2 questions, so just hang out for a sec.
And then there's the Slack. There's always Service Fabric, the issues list up on GitHub. You can always reach out to us individually, and we want to make sure that we
Advisors
group.
Advisors.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, folks, we'll see you next month. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. These things always go fast.
Yeah, always at the end.